We also discussed, obviously, Gaza. And I think before we get to phase two, which is, what's going to happen afterwards, we want to get the children fed. We made a contribution a week ago of $60 million, all going into food. We only hope the food goes to the people that need it, because so much, as you know, when you do something there, it gets taken by Hamas or somebody, but it gets taken. But and we're prepared to help. We want to help. It's a terrible situation. The whole thing is terrible. It's been bad for many years, but it's great to hear you feel the same way that I do. We have to help on a humanitarian basis before we do anything. We have to get the kids fed. So we've been sending in a lot of food. A lot of the food that's been going there has been sent by the United States. I spoke yesterday with the president of the European Union, Ursula, who was terrific also on the subject, and she's going to play a big role also in helping us. So we have a good group of countries that are going to help with the humanitarian needs, which is food, sanitation, and some other things. It's very difficult to deal with Hamas. As I said, we got a tremendous amount of hostages out, but it would take place in drips and drabs. You'd get 10, you get 5, you get 2, you'd get 10, 12. We get 12 one time. Many of them would come to the White House, and they were so thankful. But I always said, when you get down to the final 10 or 20, you're not going to be able to make a deal with these people, because they use them as a shield. And when they give them up, they no longer have a shield. And the people of Israel feel so strongly about the hostages. Some people would take a different view, but they feel so strongly about the hostages. So that's an ongoing process. Hamas has become very difficult to deal with in the last couple of days, because they don't want to give up these last 20, because they think as long as we have them, they have protection. But I don't think it can work that way. So I'm speaking to Bibi Netanyahu, and we are coming up with various plans. We're going to say it's a very difficult situation. If they didn't have the hostages, things would go very quickly. But they do, and we know where they have them in some cases, and you don't want to go riding roughshod over that area, because that means those hostages will be killed. Now, there are some people that would say, well, that's the price you pay, but we don't like to say that. We don't want to say that. And I don't think the people of Israel want to say that either, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people would say, just get it done and whatever it is. You could also say speed might be better for the hostages. You go through, with speed, you may have a better chance, because they're in deep trouble. They're in deep trouble. You saw October 7th, and you saw what the damage and the horror that they committed. People can't forget that. They tend to forget it, but they can't forget. That was one of the most evil things I've ever seen. And you just cannot forget that. So we're very much involved. The Prime Minister's involved. I'm involved. We're going to set up food centers, and we're going to do it in conjunction with some very good people, and we're going to supply funds. And we just took in trillions of dollars. We got a lot of money, and we're going to spend a little money on some food. And other nations are joining us. I know your nation's joining us, and we have all of the European nations joining us, and others also have called, and they want to be helpful. So we're going to set up food centers and where the people can walk in, and no boundaries. We're not going to have fences, and they can't. They see the food from 30 you would say yards away, and they see the food. It's all there, but nobody's at it because they have fences set up that nobody can even get it. It's crazy what's going on over there.
Mr. President, you just talked about setting up food centres in conjunction with other organisations.
Right.
You're talking about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or recognised aid agencies. How will this work?
Well, it's going to be working with the United States. We'll be helping with the food. We have a lot of access to food. We got a lot of food ourselves, and we're going to bring it over there. We're also going to make sure that they don't have barriers stopping people. You've seen the areas where they actually have food, and the people are screaming for the food, and they're 35, 40 yards away, and they won't let them because they have lines that are set up. And whether they're set up by Hamas or whoever, but they're very strict lines, so we have to get rid of those lines. But we're going to be getting some good, strong food. We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids are That's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that. So we're going to be even more involved. We did some airlifts before, some airdrops, and the people are running for it. And the Prime Minister is going to help us. They're very effective with that. You've done that before, and for many, they've done that for 100 years very well. So it's not very hard to do, actually.
President Donald Trump telling reporters a humanitarian crisis in Gaza is, quote, one of the main reasons for his meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The two are meeting in this moment. He also was asked about comments from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Prime Minister saying there is no starvation in Gaza. Here's exactly what he said yesterday. Take a listen.
Israel is presented as though we are applying a campaign of starvation in Gaza. What a bold-faced lie. There is no policy of starvation in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza.
So the president moments ago was asked whether he agreed with those claims from Netanyahu.
Based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry. But we're giving a lot of money and a lot of food, and other nations are now stepping up. I know that this nation is, right?
It's
here.
a humanitarian crisis.
Right.
It's an absolute catastrophe. And nobody wants to see that. And I think people in Britain are revolted at seeing what they're seeing on their screens.
Joining me now, CNN political and global affairs commentator Sabrina Singh. Sabrina, good to have you here this morning. So CNN is reporting as well the Trump administration does not, at this time, have a high-level official in place who has been appointed to focus on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Given what we're seeing, the growing international outrage, what could having someone in that position actually change? Would it make a difference?
Well, I think it certainly make a difference in terms of one person's sole responsibility and job being focused on the crisis that continues to develop within Gaza. But at the end of the day, you have a high-level senior administration official like Steve Witkoff, who has engaged both Israel and Hamas when it comes to a ceasefire. And certainly, during my time during the Biden administration, we had people at different levels of government not only engaging Israeli officials on what was happening on the ground as they were conducting activities against Hamas, but pushing the conversation on humanitarian aid getting in. And we were able to open some of those land access routes, but that is clearly not happening. And I don't know that humanitarian aid getting into Gaza is a priority of this administration, although you are seeing a bit of a rhetoric shift from the president. And I think that is coming as you're seeing this global outcry and some of the images on your screen of children literally starving to death in Gaza.
And certainly a more forceful answer in that moment that we just played from Keir Starmer when President Trump was asked about this. There's also, in terms of getting the aid in, the UN has outlined the challenges that it has faced, citing, among other issues, that the IDF, according to the UN, is regularly denying or has delayed coordinated movements. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said there are safe corridors for aid delivery, also said that the UN should, and I'm quoting him here, stop finding excuses. The new pauses in fighting, is that enough to allow in the aid that is needed?
I mean, I think it's a good thing that there are some brief pauses in fighting, but we've seen pauses like this happen in the past, and it's never been successful in allowing the amount of aid that needs to get into Gaza successfully reach the people. And, when the Israeli government is talking about some of those aid distribution sites, there's only 4 open and in the southern part of the country, and they're being overrun within Gaza. And so there's just not enough aid sites throughout the Gaza Strip, particularly in the north, to get aid to the people that need it most, which is why you're seeing humanitarian airdrops led by Jordan and even the Israeli government to inject more emergency aid in. You don't do airdrops like that unless there is a on-the-ground humanitarian crisis where people can physically not reach aid. And so they really need to open these land routes. There needs to be pressure from this administration. But this is, of course, all coming on the heels as France on Friday recognized a Palestinian state, the first G7 country to do that, which I think is important because that's putting a lot of pressure on the Israeli government to do more in Gaza.
All right, with us now is Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat from Maryland, who is on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We just heard from the president's senator as he was meeting or beginning to meet with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, called the situation in Gaza a humanitarian crisis. What's the U.S. responsibility for the Palestinians inside Gaza right now, Senator?
John, President Trump has not called upon the Netanyahu government to allow the international organizations that had been providing the food and delivery of humanitarian assistance to resume those efforts. He has not said a peep about that. And the United States is now complicit in this because Donald Trump, President Trump, sent $30 million to create this alternative to the international organization's humanitarian aid delivery, so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has become the death trap. That's where we've seen these pictures of starving Palestinian civilians crowding around only to be shot by the IDF or these security contractors. Donald Trump is using American taxpayer dollars to fund that death trap. He should stop that immediately. I just organized another 20 senators to send a letter to Secretary Rubio about that yesterday. And Donald Trump has been completely complicit and negligent. And the United States needs to speak out for once and join other countries in doing that.
So just so I have this clear, are you suggesting the United States cease military aid or the sale of weapons to Israel so long as this starvation in Gaza continues?
Well, what I was referring to right now, John, was the fact that we're spending money to create this alternative private organization backed by mercenaries that has created these deaths. I do believe that we should pause offensive military assistance to the Netanyahu government so long as the Netanyahu government is engaged in what is clearly a strategy to use food as a weapon of war and to try to use it for population control. We've heard members of the Netanyahu coalition just in the last couple days talk about essentially taking over Gaza, pushing the Palestinians out of Gaza entirely.
And again, so we're going to hear from the president again shortly. What would, if he could say one sentence, come out and say one sentence about Gaza after meeting with the British Prime Minister, what would you hope it would be?
He should say, Prime Minister Netanyahu, let the food in, let the international humanitarian organizations resume funding. We used to have 500 trucks a day going into Gaza. The reality is if the Netanyahu government wanted to, we could quickly get food and nutrition to people throughout Gaza.
Senator, at the end of his statement, he made
and he should make clear, he should make clear, John, he should make clear that there'd be consequences for not doing that. And again, he should stop funding this alternative organization that's become a death trap.